Hello, everyone. This is William Saunders. I'm the director of the Center for Human Rights at Catholic University of America. This is another edition of the Barefoot Lawyer Reports, and I'm here, as always, with our distinguished fellow, Chen Guangcheng, the...
Hello, my friend.
And also, we're here with Bob Fu, who is the president of China Aid. And we're here in Washington, D.C., and Bob has come to Washington for an event that he's doing tomorrow at the Victims of Communist Memorial, and Guangcheng is part of that event. So Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Why are you here?
Thank you, Dr. Saunders, for having me again with Guangcheng. It is involved with actually a mutual friend of me and Guangcheng, courageous Chinese human rights lawyer, Gao Zhisheng, that's his name. And he was suffering for over 10 years of constant kidnapping, imprisonment, torture, as actually Guangcheng had suffered before he came to the US. And he was the first one, really, I think, in Chinese legal professionals by challenging the Communist Party's suppression of the religious, one of the most persecuted religious groups, that's a Falun Gong group, after 1999, when Jiang Zemin and the communist regime passed that anti-evil cult law and deemed that as evil cult. And honestly, the Falun Gong as a belief was totally forbidden. I mean, even for individuals. I mean, I'm a Christian pastor, Christian believer. As much as persecution the Christian churches had experienced, at least the Communist Party had some official churches called a Three Self-Patriotic Movement. As long as you are dedicated, loyal to the Communist Party, you're allowed to exist. So the Falun Gong as a faith is not even allowed to exist since 1999. So no courts no prosecutors is even allowed to accept a case. I mean, despite of hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners were being arbitrarily arrested and tortured and documented thousands of deaths. And so our friend Gao Zhisheng, I think in the legal professional, basically wrote a letter first challenging that after documenting this horrific kind of religious persecution. Of course, he also stood up for the persecuted Christian pastors imprisoned, like a pastor, like my friend, my co-worker in Beijing in our house church, Pastor Cai Zhuohua, who later on was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. So Gao Zhisheng was also one of the defending lawyers of him. And just because of that, he had to suffer all this and for more than 13 years. And of course, after also the international campaign, and he was freed just for a couple years. And he was missing yet again, forced disappearance. And this year marked the 5 years. And basically, last month, I mean, the month of August, marked the 5 years of another time, this 5 years of enforced disappearance. And nobody knows where he is, and dead or alive, and his condition, of course. And so we rescued his wife, Miss Gong He, and their 2 children in 2009 after they were rescued to Bangkok in Thailand. And so the family had never seen, met with lawyer Gao Zhisheng. So it's a really very heartbreaking situation.
So no word from him. He's just disappeared.
Disappeared. At the same time, the toll of the price the family has been paying is so heavy during this 5 years forced in disappearance time. At least 2 family members, both Mr. Gao's side and his wife's side, committed suicide under tremendous distress and threats. Committed suicide.
Wow.
One dumped into the river, one dumped from the building.
That's horrible.
Yeah. What a heavy, human life toll. So we ought to stand up, for this family, for lawyer Gao Zhisheng. He's also known as the conscience of China. So so this time we decided to host at this 5-year anniversary, host an international press conference with the victims of communism memorial together, and some member of Congress will be there, and Mr. Gao's wife, Miss Gong He, will be there too, and also unveil a portrait of Gao Zhisheng, and that is going to be astonishing.
Yes. So Guangcheng, would you like to say something about Gao?
Yeah, I can talk a little more. 2005, the Communist Party started to prosecute us. At that time, I remember that it is September. The Communist Party kidnapped me from Beijing and took me back in Shandong and put under house arrest. And another person is Guo Feixiong. They kidnapped him and sent him to Guangdong province and put house arrest. Then the Communist Party ordered more than 10 cars. The special police follow Gao Zhisheng in Beijing the same time, 2005. Yeah.
And Gao Zhisheng also he's one of the friends, tried to visit Dongshigu village and got the car flipped almost.
I saw the picture. Yeah, the car was flipped over.
Yeah. That is 2006. Gao Zhisheng drive the car with the friends come to my hometown to try to support me. The Communist Party, of course, ordered a lot of thugs and take off their clothes and beat them a lot and stealing their the money and the device like that. Devices.
Their phones and
it's phone, iPad, like that. Yeah, anything. Yeah, the God wants, they can take away.
So Gao is a great human rights lawyer and is known in China, and so the Communist Party has now disappeared him, what Guangcheng calls, he may be in a black jail, and nobody can get any information. Unlike, when Guangcheng went under house arrest, we were able to get some information about what was going on, but we don't know anything about what's happening with Gao. So this event at the Victims of Communism is to raise this issue and the profile of this issue in the press, right?
Yeah, this kidnapped more than 5 years and 37 days. And before 2009, the Communist Party kidnapped him and put him in the military building in the basement, tortured him more than 21 months. Yeah, and now happened not again. I don't know the 3rd times or the 5th times, but this time horrible. No one knows where he is. No one knows he's still alive or died.
Is the U.S. putting pressure on China about him?
I think not enough. His wife come to the Washington, D.C. Several times to ask the U.S. government to help her to find her husband. But looks like, I think the U.S. can do a lot. But for me, I think they did not enough, only a little. So I hope Biden administration should stand up with the human rights. If the Communist Party continue to prosecute the human rights, we should find a way to punish them.
Punish the CC.
Yeah, not just Yeah, appeasement, right? Appeasement can't resolve the problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those listeners who are not familiar with the Gao Zhisheng story, so we also smuggled out his manuscripts after he was released from the first imprisonment and torture. And that was another miracle, like God out of his manuscript, kind of under strict house arrest. So we worked with the American Bar Association, ABA, and published the English version called Unwavering Convictions and Gao Zhisheng's 10-year torture and faith in China's future. It's in English in Amazon. So people can also read that book and know who he is. And
Yes.
I remembered after that time he was released, I had a number of hours of kind of a conversation over the phone with him. And I mean, he was sharing, I mean, he's a man of faith. He told me that how he knew God was astonishing. Was like he said, the kind of most vivid time that he know God loves him and his presence was during the most notorious torture time. He was put naked and a few interrogators using high volume, voltage electric shock batons, torturing him all over his body, including his private parts. Basically, he said, at that time he prayed the prayer to God. He said, help me and shield me, and a miracle happened. He said it was that time he could smell the burning of his skin, but all of a sudden, he said he did not feel any pain.
Wow.
He said God must have a shield around him to the point he fell asleep and snoring. And
Wow.
He said those torturers were so angry at him, can you imagine they were using electric shock baton torturing you and you were snoring at them, and he was like, they pour cold water and waking him up. We were so exhausted, and wet with sweat, and you were snoring, and what he said, told them? He said, the reason I fell asleep at peace was because the one who is inside me is much powerful, bigger than you guys.
I think Bob Fu should describe more about the torture to let the listener understand how evil the Comparty. That's very important. That happened every moment now.
I mean, you would think these human rights lawyers like Gao Zhisheng, like Chen Guangcheng, they are the best citizens for Chinese society, right?
Yes.
They're not even calling for revolution, or even overthrowing the Communist Party. At the time, they were basically trying to follow the Chinese Communist Party's own law to make the Communist Party to obey its own laws, constitutions. And yet they were treated as enemies of the state and being tortured. Really now is so prevalent everywhere. In this, they're treating this dissidents.
Well, I was talking to Guangcheng a little bit before, and we were talking about the things they're doing now to keep human rights defenders from interfering with the party congress and stuff that's coming up. And we've talked in previous podcasts, and I recommend the listeners to go on our webpage and listen to some of the past podcasts about all the things they're doing with after COVID and using excuses of health to give you a score on your health. And if you can be green or yellow or red, and unless you're green, you can't travel. So one way they control human rights defenders is they just give them a yellow score, and they can't buy bus tickets and they can't buy train tickets.
One lawyer just happened to travel to Shanghai to defend another dissident. As soon as he stepped out of the train at this train station square, because the color turned to yellow, according to this health dictatorship,
Yeah.
really held tyranny, right?
Yeah.
I mean, immediately people treat him like poisonous. Like, in the past it took some public security officers to get there.
Yeah.
And now you instantly became the poison of the society. So nobody, everyone is supposed to capture you and throw you into a quarantine room. I mean, that's how they're treating the Chinese citizens now.
So Gao and Guangcheng were among those who tried to make the Chinese Communist Party follow the rule of law. And for people listening, maybe the basic thing for a just society is you follow the rule of law, which means the powerful have to follow the rules that the powerless have to follow. You can't use the law but the Chinese Communist Party has gotten worse and worse, and now it's even worse now than it was.
Absolutely.
And Gao has disappeared, and so this event at the Victims of Communist Memorial is about him, and it's about what has happened to China, which has descended even further into a totalitarian state.
Absolutely.
Where citizens have lost even more freedom, and there's no rule of law.
No rule of law.
And it's just arbitrary power. So it's very important for people to understand this man is very important because he's a human being, but he's also very important because he shows clearly what's happening in China. And as Guangcheng says over and over, we have to stand up to the CCP. If we don't stand up to the CCP, they just become worse and worse. And you have to be willing to confront them. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think the Communist Party, you look like, don't think the Communist Party very far away,
Don't think it's very far away.
Yeah, the Communist Party is around you and me. Anywhere, the Hollywood, the Wall Street, the business companies, even the universities, the Congress, and the administration, anywhere you can find them. So very, very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Yeah, it's a big theme of what we're trying to do. Guangcheng and I are trying to do is Americans, they should of course be concerned in a national security sense about China's power, but they need to understand it's not something that's outside the borders of this country. It is freedom in the United States of America is at risk from the Chinese Communist Party. It has so much money. It buys people's silence. It buys professors' silence. It buys media silence. It buys Hollywood silence. And we have to be very vigilant or we lose our own freedom.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very, very powerful point. I mean, the CCP's kind of transnational repression has extended almost every corner on earth. I mean, from Sri Lanka, from South Africa to the Djibouti to, the kidnapping in Thailand, Burma of Chinese citizens. I mean, even Swedish citizens are kidnapped because of the voice of their displeasure of Communist Party. And you have in the UAE, I mean, the United Arab, country, China would have their Chinese top diplomats set up its own black jail.
In the United
Arab, I mean, we have to send our Texans to the city that in the UAE. What's that?
Yeah, I can't remember.
That big, famous city, basically to rescue these Chinese who were being put in the black jail. The interrogators are the Chinese diplomats. They transfer a villa into a prison.
Yeah.
That's incredible, and I know the Chinese Communist Party.
Dubai, that's the city.
Dubai.
Yeah.
And they're very active in Latin America, very active in Africa, and as the Chinese Communist Party expands freedom decreases.
If we can't send the democracy, the rule of law in China, the Communist Party will send the authoritarianism to the U.S.
Yeah,
That's so true.
I think that's the important basic point.
That's right.
I mean, anybody listening, this is not a peripheral thing you can pay attention to or ignore or pay a little. I mean, this is the central struggle, we could say, in the world between freedom and totalitarianism. And the Chinese Communist Party is pushing totalitarianism, and the U.S. and everybody and all the citizens and people in other countries have to push for freedom, or we'll lose it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, just a few years ago, when the Taiwan president Tsai Ing-wen just had made a stop over in New York, on her way to some other country, some dissidents, Chinese dissidents, just voluntarily holding a kind of welcome party on the street in Manhattan. And guess what? The Chinese embassies and thugs or their own people start beating up them at the street of New York City.
Wow.
And made sent to the emergency room in the hospital.
Incredible.
And no one got arrested, no investigation at all. I mean, my family, like barely a year ago, was being surrounded for 2 months by as many as 100 communist thugs occupy the street in front of my house. Every day from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, showing up and yelling and threatening my wife and my children.
Yes.
Incredible.
2 months.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
So U.S. citizens are being threatened by communist thugs in the United States.
In the United soil.
What could be a better illustration of how dangerous this situation is?
In West Texas,
Yes.
especially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, West Texas. I mean, that's a conservative state. You think they would stand up to the communists?
That's right.
I don't know how to emphasize it anymore, but just people stop and think about that. In New York City, American citizens and immigrants are beaten up by Chinese Communist Party embassy people, nobody arrested.
No.
And in Texas, Bob Fu's house is surrounded every day from 9 to 5 with Chinese communist dupes, insulting him, threatening his family. I mean, it's a very serious issue in the U.S. People have got to take it seriously.
Yeah, and we know, everybody knows the ringleader, and the ringleader for that threatening operation is known to everyone, to law enforcement. He's still at Lowe's.
Incredible.
And enjoy his luxurious life. He's still in New York City or Connecticut.
And the thing about this, well, I don't want to rehearse all the history, but the fact is, I've been involved in this for a long time, and we oppose certain trade deals with China back around 1999 and stuff, like World Trade Organization membership or most favored nation status. And the hope of the people who supported it was that China would learn to play by the rules. But we said at the time, they don't play by the rules. They don't respect the rules. So what has happened in that 20-year period is China has gotten extremely rich, and they undermine every organization they're involved in. Their riches is what allows them to do so many bad things, because they can pay people or transfer money or bribe people or but they couldn't if they weren't so powerful. So we would be much better off if we had not allowed them to become so wealthy. And the U.S., I think, made bad mistakes where so much U.S. industry was lost and gone to China, where another issue we haven't talked about is, one of the reasons China is able to do things so cheaply is they don't pay anybody anything, and sometimes they use prison labor and stuff like that. So, it's incredible. I don't know. China has been, the CCP has been taking advantage of I don't know, indifference, stupidity, ignorance, and maybe just foolishness of people in America for a long time. You have to stand up to them. They've got richer, things have gotten worse. Unless we stand up to them, they'll keep getting richer and things will keep getting worse.
That's unfortunately that is the reality. Is we enrich our own enemies.
Yeah.
And basically, we enable these enemies. I mean, the K Street, those Washington lobbyists. I mean, both Republicans and Democrats. You have the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, became publicly lobbying for Chinese spying. The telecommunication, Huawei, and you have the former vice presidential candidate of Democratic Party, Drew Lieberman, is publicly hired as the GT 那个叫什么? Another telecommunication company. I'm sorry for that.
GTE?
Yeah, there's was on the sanction list. And defending their safety to Americans. I mean,
yeah, it's money. The Chinese Communist Party has so much money that it has a major corrupting influence in the United States. And to draw this podcast to a close, an example of that is maybe that we don't know anything about lawyer Gao because the U.S. hasn't pressed hard enough, can't, it's compromised, and so this defender of human rights has disappeared, and we want to change that situation. So your event tomorrow, I assume, will be filmed and there'll be video of it and there'll be all kinds of ways people. So once you hear this podcast, you should, we'll have things on our website, and I'm sure China Aid will have things on their website, and you should go to those websites and learn more about what's going to happen, but get involved in fighting against the CCP's destruction of human rights of its citizens as well as our own citizens.
To read more about Gao Zhisheng's story, as well as those of countless other human rights activists and human rights atrocities committed by the Chinese Communist Party, visit catholic.edu/chr.